Exodus chapter 3, the call of God, part 1. Exodus chapter 3, actually we start at verse 6. Up to this point, Moses, in the backside of the desert with all of his sheep, sees a bush burning but not burning. It seems to be on fire, but it's not being consumed. So he goes over and he looks. And God tells him, first of all, take your shoes off, because the ground you stand on is holy. And then he says, then God introduces himself. He says, I'm the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look on God. We spoke about that last week. Now, this is the call part. Verse 7. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt. I have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out of that land unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me. He repeats himself, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Why does he repeat it? Because it's important. That's what's important to God. Now, before I go further, it's interesting because God introduces himself first. I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm the God that your parents were talking about. So it's like, there's no question of who are you? But he knows who he is anyway. How is that? Not just because God said, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He knows that also because of how he feels. That's actually the second part of the message next week. But when a call like that happens, you know, first of all, because you know that it's God because you feel unworthy, and secondly, the call itself, you know it's from God. Why? Because it doesn't appeal to the flesh, and it's always what you'd expect God to do. So after this, and he repeats himself, verse 10, he says, come now therefore, and I will send you unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Wow. Just like that. Well, you remember, that's how Moses got himself into trouble 40 years before that. He was going to deliver his people. He was going to take care of his people. He was going to represent them, and he had to run out of Egypt. So now God has come back and put the very thing that he feared the most into his face. You've got to go back to Egypt and face Pharaoh. Now it's interesting because God says, I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Well, you don't have a problem with that. That's what God says he's going to do, right? So what's that got to do with me? Well, because God always works through people. God isn't calling a committee here to study the problem. He's saying to Moses, come now therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring forth the people of the children of Israel out of Egypt. So I'm sending you. Now, you notice he didn't ask him. He said, would you like to go? Should we negotiate how this is going to be done? He didn't even say, let me tell you how we're going to do it. He just says, I'm going to send you to Pharaoh to take the children of Israel out of Egypt. Well, now in the natural, you're going to say, well, how am I going to do that? Why am I doing it? How am I going to get there? What's the logistics of the deal? How are we going to finance this project? He's not asking any of that stuff. And God's not saying. When God calls you, it's a call. And the whole point is, he's not telling him anything because Moses, like Paul, like Abraham, has to rely on God. You're never going to rely on your own resources to accomplish the purposes of God. Why? Because if you could do it on your own, you wouldn't need God.
Amen.
This is the call of God, not the call of Moses. Not Moses, he haphazardly did something and he had to run out of the country and he was gone for 40 years. So you got to ask yourself, he obviously wasn't ready when he was 40 years old and got run out. Now, 40 years after that, he's 80 years old. He's got a wife, he's got 2 sons. Not much else besides that. So why does God wait until he's 80 years old, has a wife and kids, to call him to go back to Egypt? Why didn't he do it 40 years before that? Didn't have any attachments. Didn't have any commitments. Didn't have to worry about wife and kids, and just, he was riding high. Because it's not about what he's got or doesn't have. God didn't call him because he was smart. God didn't call him because he was good looking. God didn't call him because he was strong. God didn't call him because he was young. God didn't call him for any of those reasons. So I've got to ask yourself, after 40 years in the woods, why did God call Moses? What made him all of a sudden acceptable to God? It was his character and his nature. The 40 years in the wilderness was exactly preparation to lead God's people out of Egypt. You say, so how is taking care of sheep for 40 years, having a wife, getting kids, how's that all preparation to lead maybe a couple million people out of Egypt? At least 600,000. And it's not. On paper, it's not. But it wasn't about what he was doing. It wasn't about training. It was about what God was making him to be in terms of the person he was. And so you see all of the circumstances. His wife, his sons, his father-in-law, his in-laws, all of that. His sheep was all about working on his character and nature to bring him to this place. And what is this place? It's not just being able to hear God. Lots of people can hear God. It wasn't about hearing God. It was about doing what God told him to do. God's not looking for intelligence. God's not even looking for someone that can hear him clearly. He's looking for obedience. And if you look time and time again, you know the rest of the story. He gets stuck, and what did he do? He turned to God. God had told him to do this, and he did it, and the people were delivered. It was being able to hear God and do what God called him to do. Now, God has no problem making sure that you hear him. I'm going to repeat that. God has no problem making sure that you hear him. If you're a believer, you're not a believer, he'll still make sure that you hear him. That's not a problem. The issue isn't whether you hear him or not. The issue is whether you obey him or not. He needs obedience. That's the only thing he needs. Just obedience. Why? Because everything that he calls you to do, he's going to empower you to do. The point is, the power comes from him, not from you. He doesn't want people with lots of talents and abilities. Why? Because that's probably going to get in the way. It's like, oh yeah, God, you just, implicitly what happens, oh yeah, I don't need to talk to you about that. I know how to do this. If you remember when they first went up into the promised land, they took Jericho, they were feeling good, says, oh, we'll go up to Ai now. Oh, we don't need to send a whole, but we'll just send 1,000 people, we'll just wipe them out. Boom! They got beaten. Why? Same thing. Oh, we know how to do this. We don't have to really ask God about, or talk to God about how, we know how to do this. We can do this. Well, they weren't prepared. That's the point. He's not looking for your talents and abilities. They tend to get in the way. He's looking for less. He's not looking for more. He'll give you what you need. So he starts off, he introduces himself, he says, this is what I'm going to do. Notice he didn't say, Moses, this is what you're going to do. He says, this is what I'm going to do. Why? Because he's taking full responsibility for what happens. Now, what would have happened if Moses didn't get with the program? But he did. There's no what if with God. This is what God wanted. This is what God got. We don't know. Maybe he called someone before that who didn't listen. It's irrelevant. God called, Moses listened, Moses did what God called him to do. So if you're thinking today, it's like, so how do I get with God's program? Pay attention to what's going on around you. I mean, Moses, he lived his life. Got a wife, a couple kids, and tended sheep. Sounds like a simple program. Doesn't sound like a program for leading a whole bunch of people out of Egypt into the wilderness, but it wasn't what he learned in the natural, it was what he learned spiritually. He was in tune with God, even if he didn't know God. He was a godly man. You want to come to the fullness of what God calling you to do? God might be calling you to something just as big as Moses. Don't scoff at it. Moses was a nobody. He was 80 years old with a wife and 2 kids on the backside of the desert. Not exactly a resume that's sterling, okay? That doesn't shine, that doesn't pop when you read it, okay? So don't look at what you got, what you don't have. That's not the issue. It's like all you got to do is say, I'm your Lord. I'm your Lord. You tell me what you want. I'll do it. That's the tough part. Not the I'm here, Lord, but the I'll do it. Easy. And then you say, I'll do it. And it's like, yeah, when am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? Maybe tomorrow. Let's do it tomorrow. You know, it's like, God knows this. It isn't trying to talk yourself out of it. It's about talking to God about it. It's like, yeah, I don't feel much like doing this. I don't really want to. Give me the strength to do what you want me to do now. Amen. Moses was humble. He didn't think of himself as a big deal. God chose this man to lead Israel out of Egypt, and he didn't think anything of himself. Didn't even defend himself, even when his older brother and sister took him on. But who am I? So God said, no, you step aside. I will deal with them. See, would you rather have God dealing with your issues than you? Then what do? Get out of the way. This is the call. There's no magic to it. There's no magic to the call of God. And every one of you has the call of God on your life. He may not be calling you to lead Israel out of Egypt, but every one of you has a call. Now, the thing about the call is it's not necessarily easy. And it will involve some sacrifice. But the issue isn't that what you sacrifice. The issue is what you get for the sacrifice. Now, it's true that Moses never got into the promised land. He saw the promised land in ways that everybody else didn't. He didn't get a chance to go into the promised land. But he experienced God in a way that nobody else did. It says in the Old Testament, he saw him face to face. He had such an experience with God that his face shone. He had to actually wear a veil because his face was shining. It said that his eyesight never faded, his hearing never faded, because he had encountered God. That's incredible. Why do I say that? Whatever you got to give up to follow the call of God in your life is well worth it. I can say that having fought God for at least a decade in terms of what he wanted me to do, I was valiant and I lost. Because he knows how to catch up to you. You can fight, but you're going to lose. Because you either get with the program or you don't. You're going to lose your fight or you're going to lose out because you did fight. But listen to the call. Get with the program. It's a marvelous adventure. And that's my message for today.